Let me start by warning you that venturing into the depths of the cursed web will lead you to encounters with unspeakable horrors. Having delved into its dark corners extensively, I can assure you that some of the grotesque sights you witness there will haunt you, perhaps forever altering your perception of humanity. Even more disconcerting is the possibility of becoming desensitized to these abominations that should evoke revulsion. Unfortunately, that's what happened to me. You may believe that you have shed all remnants of innocence now that you've matured into adulthood, acquiring knowledge about the grim realities of the world. But trust me, you likely retain more innocence than you realize. Do not snuff it out by delving too deeply into the evil abyss of the cursed web. As expected, I've witnessed all the overtly sinister content and more, videos depicting decapitations and sites recruiting for cults. However, one taboo topic that is seldom discussed is crush vids. These videos showcase individuals, predominantly women, subjecting small animals like kittens or rabbits to unspeakable torture under the weight of their high-heeled shoes, often atop a glass table. It caters to the dark fetishes of certain individuals, be they men or, in some instances, women, who derive a perverse sexual thrill from such acts. Now, before passing judgment on me, let me clarify that I do not derive any pleasure from these abominable displays. However, driven by morbid curiosity, I confess to having watched 4 of these videos. You know it's wrong to look, but you simply cannot tear your eyes away, much like the morbid fascination that drew most of us to watch the infamous 2 Girls, 1 Cup video. It's disturbing, twisted, and utterly messed up. Among the countless atrocities I witnessed, one video stands out as the most grotesque. In this particular video, a woman had a chillingly jovial smile plastered on her face as she drove the heel of her stiletto shoe into the eye of a defenseless kitten. The sheer callousness of her act was enough to shock even the most hardened animal lover. Steer clear of such vile content if you hold any regard for these innocent creatures. Now, let me delve into the heart of a harrowing story. Once, I received an invitation to a website after conversing with a stranger online. He assured me it was something I would find intriguing. Uncertain of what awaited me, I decided to follow the link, an error I would soon regret. The link transported me to a website housing a solitary video. The footage was grainy and of abysmal quality. It displayed 4 Chinese men sitting around a decrepit table in a shoddy apartment. It was evident that alcohol had impaired their senses, with one of them resting his head on his arms, which lay motionless on the table. As the camera occasionally dipped downwards, I caught glimpses of a tarp-covered floor beneath them, ominous in its implications. Initially, my boredom prompted me to consider skipping ahead. However, I soon realized that this was no ordinary video, it was a live stream. The person who had sent me the link instructed me to wait patiently for 5 minutes. So, while I waited, I opened another browser tab, periodically checking back on the stream. Upon one such return, I noticed that only 3 men remained seated at the table, and an enigmatic box had materialized on the screen. The characters inside the box were inscribed in Chinese, or at least a script I presumed to be Chinese. I distinctly recall 4 boxes, each housing number that incessantly changed. Initially, this detail didn't strike me as significant. But before long, the 4th man reappeared, bearing a revolver in his trembling hands. He resumed his seat at the table alongside the others, casually placing the gun before him. I could hear the person behind the camera speaking, his tone dripping with aggression, though the words were unintelligible to me. Faint voices chimed in from off-camera, engaging in conversation with the man who had produced the firearm. He grunted a reply and spun the pistol on the table, casting a shadow of dread upon my realization. This live stream unfolded as a game of Russian Roulette, hosted on a sinister gambling website. Participants wagered their bitcoins, presumably placing 4-to-1 bets on the survival of each player. The ever-changing numbers on the screen likely represented the monetary stakes for each individual. Whether the wagers determined their life or death, I cannot say. It was a morbid spectacle reminiscent of the wretched film, The Deer Hunter, a sight I struggled to believe. Curiously, these men did not resemble captives forced against their will to participate. Instead, they appeared as weary businessmen or perhaps desperate souls driven to desperate measures. I cannot definitively discern the truth. At this juncture, I should have severed my connection to this sickening display. Alas, I possess an insatiable appetite for punishment. The man whom the gun had eventually pointed at pressed it against his temple and pulled the trigger, only to find an empty chamber. He emerged unscathed. The next participant wasted no time, jamming the gun into his mouth before pulling the trigger. A blinding flash engulfed the screen, evoking memories of the notorious Bud Dwyer video. In an instant, a grotesque fountain of blood erupted from the man's head. I couldn't help but notice a wisp of smoke rising from his lifeless mouth and nostrils, shrouding his collapse back into his chair. Anonymous figures emerged from the shadows, dragging away the limp body on the chair. Overwhelmed by revulsion, I promptly terminated my connection to the abomination before me. Occasionally, my mind wanders back to that video, intermingling with other horrifying experiences I've had the misfortune of witnessing. As I mentioned earlier, such haunting images linger indefinitely, etching themselves into the deepest recesses of your psyche. It was a few months after that dreadful encounter that my life took a turn for the worse. I found myself facing insurmountable financial issues, burdened by debts, and struggling to make ends meet. The weight of my responsibilities pressed upon me, and desperation clouded my judgment. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit apartment, surrounded by stacks of unpaid bills, a thought crossed my mind, a thought that would lead me down a path I never imagined I would tread. I remembered the cursed web, the dark corners of the internet that held the potential for financial salvation, albeit at a tremendous cost. Driven by my dire circumstances, I made a fateful decision. I would become a participant in the very horrors I had once watched from a distance, hoping to reap the rewards that the cursed web promised. It was a pact with the devil, a plunge into the depths of depravity that I could never fully comprehend. With a racing heart and trembling hands, I ventured back into the sinister underbelly of the internet. I navigated through hidden forums, communicating with individuals who knew the secrets of the cursed web. Slowly, I gained their trust, proving my willingness to embrace darkness for the sake of financial gain. Soon enough, an opportunity presented itself, a chance to participate in a macabre game, much like the one I had witnessed in that chilling video. It was a twisted version of Russian Roulette, where the stakes were high, and the consequences were deadly. I couldn't believe what I was getting myself into, but desperation clouded my judgment, pushing me forward. The night of the event arrived, and I found myself in a dimly lit room, surrounded by strangers who mirrored the desperation in my eyes. The air was heavy with tension, and the smell of fear lingered. As I sat at the table, a revolver was placed before me, its cold metal sending shivers down my spine. I exchanged glances with the other participants, their faces a mixture of resignation and anguish. We were all victims of our circumstances, driven to this point by the cruel hand life had dealt us. There was no turning back now. The game began, and with each round, my heart pounded in my chest. The clicking of the trigger echoed in my ears, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life. Fate was no longer in our hands, it rested on the whims of chance. Round after round passed, and somehow, I managed to survive. The odds were against me, and I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and guilt with each empty chamber. It was as if I had become a pawn in a twisted game, dancing with death itself. But as the game reached its climax, my luck ran out. The barrel of the gun turned toward me, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. The trigger was pulled, and a deafening explosion filled the room. Pain seared through my body, and darkness enveloped my consciousness. I awoke in a sterile hospital room, my body battered and broken. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive, that the bullet had narrowly missed vital organs. I couldn't comprehend how I had ended up here, surviving the very fate I had willingly embraced. In the weeks that followed, I slowly pieced together the events that had transpired. It seemed that the authorities had raided the game just as my turn came. I was saved by their intervention, spared from the ultimate sacrifice demanded by the cursed web. As I recovered, I realized the gravity of my actions. I had delved into the darkness out of desperation, sacrificing my moral compass for the promise of financial relief. But the price I had paid was far greater than any amount of money could justify. I had stared into the abyss, and it had consumed a part of my soul. From that day forward, I vowed to rebuild my life, to find a way out of the financial hole that had driven me to such madness. I sought help, connecting with support groups and seeking therapy to mend the wounds that ran deeper than the physical scars on my body. Though the memories of the cursed web and the horrors I witnessed will forever haunt me, they serve as a reminder of the darkness that resides within us all and the importance of holding on to our humanity, even in the face of desperation. So, heed my warning. Do not venture into the depths of the cursed web. Do not sacrifice your integrity and well-being for the lure of quick wealth. There are no shortcuts in life, and the cost of embracing darkness is a burden far too heavy to bear. Integrity and well-being for the lure of quick wealth. There are no shortcuts in life, and the cost of embracing darkness is a burden far too heavy to bear.